Hi, I'm Jeff Foxworthy, and welcome to Gamekeeper Podcast. If you want to learn more about farming for wildlife and habitat management, then, buddy, you are in the right place. Join the Gamekeeper crew direct from Mossy Oak Land Enhancement Studio as they discuss the latest wildlife and habitat management practices, news, and, of course, hunting. There's no telling what you'll learn, but I'm going to tell you, I bet it's interesting. Enjoy.
Welcome, everybody, today to the bowels of the Mossy Oak Land Enhancement building, the studio.
The studio.
Jeff Foxworthy.
Yeah. And I think that's probably the best term I've ever heard to describe this place.
It is. So look, I'm Bobby Cole, and next to me on the right over here is the man of mystery, Lanny Wallace. And then over here to my left is we lovingly refer to him as the tree nerd, and that's Dudley Phelps.
Hey, guys.
In the house, raising the roof. So this is our second podcast. We probably ought to tell everybody that we were ranked after only one podcast in the top 50 of all outdoor podcasts.
We were in the top 50 of the 50 podcasts that exist for the outdoors.
Go.
So I think there's 49, and we were in the top 50.
So you're saying we made the list?
I think we made the list. I never really saw the list. That's just what I heard.
I was on a list in high school one time, but I don't want to talk about that.
Yeah.
You're probably on multiple lists.
Most wanted.
Y'all remember in high school they used to talk about your personal record, that you if something went wrong, it went on your record.
On your record, yeah.
Where is that record?
I don't know. Same thing, we talk about with the Federal Trade Commission. I've been worried about the Federal Trade Commission for years.
Well, they're for real.
Yeah, but you can't call them.
Oh, I bet there's somebody there.
I've tried. Yeah. I don't know. I think there's just a bunch of filing cabinets up there.
Well, all right, let's move on. Dudley, what's going on in the world of native nurseries before we get started on this podcast?
Well, we're just kind of getting ready for our up-and-coming season. It's just so hot right now. There's not a whole lot of orders or tree planting going on, but we're just doing a lot of prep work.
So in another 8 weeks, you'll probably pull the curtain and just let everybody pour into the website and start ordering trees?
We will open the floodgates, but we do have a few items kind of trickling in.
Sprinkling.
Yeah.
We got some good-looking crops over there, so
it's
super excited about it.
Yeah, it's going to be a good year.
Kind of worried about, the reason we hold off shipping is because the fear factor of plants withered, in hot boxes in the summer. We know the northern guys are getting ready, to put some stuff in the ground. So just be really precautious about.
That makes total sense. Mm-hmm. Right now,
what about biologic?
Yeah, the guys need to be enjoying the bio rocks right now because it's so hot, and the deer, especially the bucks, are hitting those rocks. And if you want to start, toward kind of about now, the end of July, 1st of August, is you can really see what a buck's going to be. And so it's time to put those rocks out if you hadn't already.
Get cameras out, too.
Get your cameras on them.
Get prepared. The season cometh.
And, it seems like this season is going to be here before we know it. It seems like since this pandemic's going on that people are trying to buy seed a little early.
Yeah.
I mean, I can feel it, and I know you can, too, watching that Shopify
No doubt
stuff.
about it.
It's the fear of no football.
Well, and you think about, the amount of more people that will probably be hunting this fall, just to your point, because of the pandemic and the things that are going on. It's going to be interesting. I know we heard, turkey hunting was through the roof. We're going to hear from some guys at the MDWFP today on some deer stuff. So
yeah. So the tip of the day would be if you're wanting to buy a specific blend of food plot seed, you probably ought to buy it early so you can make sure you have it.
Mm-hmm. And we're doing we got a pretty good ship window on trees too, so you can actually buy your trees now, and we'll ship them in the near future to you. So there's a date selector on native nurseries too. So if you want to go and get stuff ordered, not trying to sell too much,
get them while it's hot.
There you go.
Limit 2 per customer.
Hey, that sounds like a good promotion.
Well, so this today we've got William McKinley from the Mississippi Wildlife. I can never remember all those acronyms, but they'll
give it to him, Dud.
Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks.
Otherwise known as MDWFP.
Yeah, that's good. So he's going to kind of give us an update. You remember back last year, about this time, there was a tragic flood going on over in the south part of the Mississippi Delta, and kind of give us an update on the wildlife in that from that scenario, and then just an overall discussion about Mississippi's deer herd. I expect we'll probably get into CWD a little bit.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard not to.
Yeah. Do you know William?
We've met at trade shows and such in the past.
It's hard to find somebody you don't know with all the colleges that you've attended and all the parties that you've been to.
Yep.
It's really difficult to find somebody that doesn't have some kind of connection to you.
He's a good guy, and Mississippi's fortunate to have him.
That's good.
We are. We've got an unbelievable state game and park agency.
Yeah, we do. Well, if y'all are ready, we can get our producer over here, Jason Cleveland, to get William McKinley on the phone for us, please.
Kill it.
Hey, William.
Hey.
Well, how are you doing? Tell us about what all is going on with your department.
Well, we're doing well, and things have gotten hot in the deer's world, and we're beginning to get, as usual this time of year, we get a few sick deer calls. I think we're probably having a little bit of a blue tongue, better known as hemorrhagic disease outbreak in a few parts of the state. That's normal. We should be getting a little of that, and you'd rather have a little of it every year than a whole lot one year. So, but overall, things are plugging right along. We're gearing up, getting ready for the 2021 deer season.
One of the things that I wanted to ask you before we kind of really get started, about this time last year, there was a flood in central part of Mississippi, and we kept hearing about how bad it was and how rough it was on the wildlife. And we actually, toward the end of the summer, sent some food plot seed down there to donated to be planted on some management areas. But I haven't really heard any updates about how that deer herd is doing down there. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I can, guys. I was over there several weeks during the summer last year. We were that flood was devastating, and I want to point out that it wasn't just last year. It happened in 2018, not as severe, and it happened again this year, and just went down back in May. And there hadn't been much press on that at all, but it was just a couple of feet lower this year than it was last year. But 2019 was the flood of record in that area, and for most people don't understand, we're dealing with a flood that partly was caused by the Mississippi River, but partly was caused by rainfall. Years ago, a series of levees and drainages were set up in that area, and basically you got one water control structure, the steel bio water control structure, that drains an area about the size of Connecticut. And the Mississippi River was at flood stage. It was in a record flood, so they couldn't open the gate to let the rain fall out. The water from just south of Memphis all the way through the Mississippi Delta was running down to the bottom. It's kind of like a giant bathtub, and we couldn't pull the plug. So areas that normally would have abundant wildlife on them were 16 to 18 feet deep. A lot of those deer had to flee for many, many miles. I would have loved to, you always look back and go, boy, I wish we'd have had this. I would have loved to have had some deer radio calling to see how far they went, but we just don't know. I can tell you from some of the areas right next to the levee there, many of those deer would have had to went 15 to 20 miles to reach dry land.
Wow.
So we had a 500,000 acre lake created in the South Delta of Mississippi. The majority of 2 whole counties were underwater for 7 months. So
wow.
It was devastating. Our agency began monitoring, and, to begin with, a whole bunch of deer were pushed up on the levee system. A lot of the deer went ahead and went down the levee system, or as the water come up, they fled into the hills into across Highway 3 into Yazoo County. So, but a lot of deer chose to try to ride it out, and had probably done that for years in short duration floods. So we began riding this levee system, conducting surveys, and we began official surveys. They began in mid-June. We began to see mortalities, and we said, okay, it got really hot about the end of May, and kind of some record level heat in May of 2019 toward the end, and these deer didn't have shade. And that was hurting them even worse than the fact that they didn't have very much food. They didn't have any food. A lot of people don't realize, but deer can't digest summer grasses like Bermuda, Bahia. That is no nutritional content. In fact, we necropsied a few deer. That's just a field autopsy of deer that had starved to death with their bellies full of Bermuda grass. So they can't digest it. But we started a 26-mile route that we were running one time a week. Well, technically twice a week. We would ride the top of the levee one day in a truck and count live deer, and we would ride the toe of the levee right along the water line in a UTV a different day of the week, up and back, and count mortalities. And during a 6-week time frame there, we documented 503 mortalities just on the levee. And that was, we were allowing some supplemental feeding. That's also in our CWD area, chronic wasting disease area. So we had to make a big choice there, but the risk of the spread of the disease was happening on a much larger basis due to shade. The competition for what little shade was available was intense. I mean, that deer were crammed into those areas, and it was a really bad situation. And you just kept looking at it thinking, hey, it'll get better. The water's got to come down soon, but it just kept getting worse and worse and carried all the way into August last year before that water finally receded. And the number of deer left on the levee system by that time was very, very few. Now, I will say that we then moved in as an agency and started working with landowners. We went to the public land. Panther Swamp National Wildlife Refuge cooperated with us in putting out cameras, several private landowners, and we rounded up every camera we could find, and we got out 314 cameras in 17 clusters, so 17 different properties. And we started these cameras on a grid system that was developed by the MSU Deer Lab. And we were able to run these cameras so they were 500 yards apart and set up. We tried to get either 12 or 25 camera grids, and we didn't bait them. They were just put out and left for the entire month of October. So we went to a GPS location, installed a camera in an area within sight of that point that looked like the best area we could get deer on camera. A lot of deer came back. So where we walked into an area with that deer had been pushed out now for over 7-8 months, and we had seen a lot of mortalities. Well, we got 8,000, almost 8,800 pictures of wildlife, and 78% of those pictures were deer. So we had a lot of deer. Now, antler quality was greatly diminished. These deer were, the antlers, they didn't have enough to eat. And I will say that the fawn crop was only 5%.
Wow.
So the flood really decimated the fawn crop over in that part of the world last year. Harvest this past season, we had implemented some more stringent regulations on harvest for that area. Some of those will continue for this year. We cut the bag limit. We shortened some things down, and plus the hunters over there in many cases made the decision to not harvest very many deer, even if it was legal. But harvest was reduced in that area. We looked at our public lands and our private DMAP properties over there, and it was reduced by well over 50% last year. And we don't know how many deer we lost. We also don't know how far CWD may have gotten spread due to that. If one of those deer, we found 2 positives in that area. About 7 miles apart, north to south. And we had not been able to do very much sampling after the second positive was found, as it came in toward the end of the 2018-2019 deer season. So, and that's when the water was coming up. And so we really don't know. We don't know the impact that the flood had on the disease. Did it push it into the hills? It's quite likely that it did. We just don't know. But it was absolutely devastating what that flood did. And I'm just talking deer here. I'm not even mentioning the hundreds of homes, churches, businesses, and all of that were impacted by that flood. But that may be a lot longer answer than you were looking for, but they're recovering, and they're looking. We're getting reports of fawns over there right now. I've already had people sending me pictures from late June into July of pictures of fawns, and the deer herd in that part of the world, it can recover very fast. Some of the most fertile ground in the U.S. So that's where we stand on the flooding.
Well, it's devastating to think about that happening over there, and boy, it kind of makes me proud to think about the hunters in that area just policing themselves, and even though it might have been legal to shoot more animals than they did, that they held off. That's what in my mind's eye, that's a true hunter. That's a gamekeeper. That's somebody that's more interested in the big picture than just instant gratification.
Well, I'll say Mississippi hunters are made that way, and it's always made me proud to work with our state. I've been here for 19 years now, and I mentioned DMAP, the Deer Management Assistance Program. That started in Mississippi. A lot of people don't realize that it started in Knoxville and Kemper County, Mississippi, and it was the first back and forth that was really out there between a wildlife biologist and a deer manager. And it started, well, we can say it really kicked off kind of a deer management revolution that started back in the early 80s and rolled forth. So Mississippi hunters have always shown the desire to try to manage that herd.
I didn't realize it had started here in that deer map, the DMAP program.
I remember it. I remember it in the 80s.
It's pretty. I think that's what most all the states call it. That.
In some form or fashion, most states that have whitetail deer have copied it to some degree, but it was a MSU pilot project between them and our agency and landowners over in Kemper and Knoxville counties is where it kicked off back in right around the end of the 1970s. So, and I still work with some properties that have been on DMAP since 1980. Been managing, collecting data. Think of that data set, a 40-year data set that we have of a deer herd, and it's changed over those years from back when people shot anything with a bone projecting out of its head to now targeting, fully as old a deer as they can get them. So, and going from almost no doe harvest to more does than bucks in the harvest to try to keep their herds balanced.
Hey folks, it's Jeff Foxworthy. When I was a kid, my dad bought back the farm that he had grown up on, and I absolutely loved that place. I knew every square inch of it. It truly was my favorite place on earth. And when you're looking to find a favorite place for you and your family, Mossy Oak Properties can help. Visit mossyoakproperties.com to begin your search today.
As you guys gather information and go through your business every day and every week and every month, do you guys keep up with what's going on in other states with the whitetail population? I was just wondering, people listening to this podcast are all over the country, and if you could shed some light just on overall how whitetail deer are doing.
I would say, guys, there's not a week really that goes by that I'm not speaking to one of my cohorts in another state, whether it's an adjacent state or whether it's a state out of the Midwest or the far north. we communicate a lot on the deer coordinator level. We have just last week, we have a deer working group meeting that we have among the Southeast. We had that meeting last week and communicate of what's happening. And we give updates to each other of what's happening state to state. And, it would take the rest of the time and then some to go over what's happening in every state. But in some states, hunter numbers are trickling up, and a lot of them, hunter numbers are trickling down. Total deer harvest kind of varies state to state. You kind of see ebbs and flows. You'll see one state starting up, and then you'll kind of reach a climax, and you'll head back down. And that's what we did in the state of Mississippi. We kind of topped out around the early 2000 mark, and then our population started dropping a little bit. But part of that was by design. We had a lot of deer back then, maybe a few too many in a lot of places, and so, but that's the same with a lot of states. So that's where collecting data over time can help you, and it helps every one of us in all the different states, and it also helps us to get together so we don't repeat bad decisions, so we can see what didn't work here and what is working there. So, but to short answer that, we communicate a lot, both professionally and as friends after we develop that professional relationship.
So right now, if a guy's in a hunting club and he's out there working on the hunting club, getting ready for food plots, if he sees a suspicious deer, sees a deer acting funny, what should he do?
Oh, well, so call our 1-800-BE-SMART number, our hotline, or he can log on, and if he has the MDWFP app, where he can check in his turkey or whatever, he can go on that app and he can note right there. We have a sick deer reporting category within that app. He can go online. We make it easy to let us know, and we want them to let us know. In fact, I've already dealt with 2 today, just this morning. We've got one, we were able to get the whole deer, and I actually got the whole deer to the lab. If I had to take a guess, I'm going to guess it's going to be hemorrhagic disease, but we'll know in a few days. Dealt with one a couple of weeks ago that turned out to be another CWD positive up in Benton County, Mississippi. But we deal with them. We have people ready to respond. We try to find the closest person, biologist or officer available, and try to get them to that area to get samples on that animal and figure out as best we can what's wrong with it. And a lot of times, I don't know if y'all noticed, but it's been kind of hot. And if it's been dead more than a few hours, we usually can't get anything from it this time of year. In the winter, that changes dramatically, and we can get samples for days after the animal is deceased. But this time of year, we got hours, not days.
I know I'd heard, and Dudley, I don't know, Bobby, if you've heard too, I think it was last year, we're talking about CWD, and the conversation was about how Mississippi was one of the first with DMAP, one of the first states to, have antler restrictions. And conversely, we're the first state to drop those antler restrictions to try to encourage the harvest of more younger bucks, actually to reduce the spread of CWD. I don't know if that's just something I picked up, or is there some truth to that, William?
We're not one of the first states. In fact, many states that have already found it have dropped some antler criteria.
Yeah.
We did lessen our antler criteria for one of your 3-buck bag limit. So you're allowed 3 bucks. 2 must meet the antler criteria, and we allowed 1. We call it buck of choice.
Well, I'm glad you told me that.
That actually gives so much more flexibility. And I tell you, when we came out with the antler spread criteria, the spread and beam length, nearly a decade ago, that was in the original recommendation, was to have 1 buck of choice to give people the freedom to landowners and deer managers in Mississippi. That's not just for CWD. That's for that guy that gets to hunt 2 days a year. And he wants to shoot a buck. Is he doing harm to the deer herd? Probably not. he's not going out and wholesale killing a whole lot of deer. It's also to you who may be managing a property very intensively, and you have a deer that you know when you look at that buck, he's a 3-year-old or older deer with a very poor set of antlers that don't make state legal, and you can remove that deer. And so it gives flexibility of management of, and I'm glad we were able to implement it. And it also gets some yearling bucks into the harvest. Now, it doesn't mean you have to shoot a small one. And we emphasize that with people. It means that you can if you so choose.
So I guess
your 3-buck baglet.
Then the logic that I was using, or I thought I was using, that CWD is more rapidly spread by younger bucks trying to find their home range. Is there any truth to that?
It is truth to that. As you're looking at, well, we think CWD spread mostly in a truck. Through moving pieces and parts, either live deer or dead deer parts, and moving them across the country. Now, once it gets somewhere, how does it spread? Well, these 1-year-old bucks, they do disperse. And usually that's going to be several miles, or a few miles, I should say, from where they were born. So you see that deer, you see him, and it's usually happening. The deer we're seeing disperse that we've monitored typically happens right before rut. So you got that deer that you see is still following its dam. It comes out in the food plot early. It's a spike, 3-point, 4-point, and you see him in November, and then all of a sudden he takes off. He leaves his dam, and he's going off. And sometimes it happens a little earlier, but he'll go a few miles. He'll find him a new area. He'll set up. He'll establish a home range. He'll call it home. If he happened to have been infected, he just took that disease a few more miles out. Now, we just are finishing up a study with MSU. And by the way, that relationship with our agency and MSU, one of the best relationships in the nation from a research and a state agency standpoint. We have gained so much information from the MSU Deer Lab over the years. We're just finishing up a radio collared study of 55 adult bucks that we had GPS collars on, taking a reading from September to February every 15 minutes. These were all 3-year-old and older bucks. We have gained a wealth of knowledge from this. These bucks were actually collared down in Madison and Yazoo County, Mississippi, along the Big Black River. The Big Black separates those two counties there. And we were able to get this large sample size of adult bucks, and a large percentage of these bucks are moving greater than 10 miles on an excursion. So a few of them had home ranges. Almost 10% of them had home ranges that were 10 miles apart. And what I mean by that is, right now, that typically related to agriculture. You got a mature buck, he's living in a soybean field. He's hanging out with a bunch of other bucks. They're all growing their antlers. They're getting pretty close to being done growing their antlers now. Here we are in early August. They'll stop growing here pretty soon, go through a month of hardening before they shed their velvet. But they're all hanging out together until about October. Then they're going to split up that bachelor group, and some of them are going to stay fairly local, and some of them are, you're going to have a few, what this study found was about 10%, may go as many as 10 miles to set up a range that they'll live November, December, January, February, March, and then they'll come back. We had one that was going almost 15 miles from his summer range. He was doing it around the same week in October, and he was coming back around the same time frame in the spring. And the crazy thing is, this deer, to go from point A to point B, which was 14 or so, 15 miles apart, he was walking like nearly 40 miles to get there. He would cross the Big Black River. One point, actually, when it dinged at 15 minutes, put him really close to a gas station parking lot. And like right by the outside diesel pumps there. And he headed on down. He crossed Highway 49. He recrossed the Big Black. He crossed the Big Black 3 times to get to where he was going, when he could have just walked straight line and got there. When he came back the same path. And he's repeated that journey 4 times with the radio collar. So it just really uncovered how much these deer are really moving. So y'all been there you've been running cameras before. You've had them out, or you've been hunting and you've been running cameras, and you know you got this 8 point and this 7 point and these smaller 8s through 6 points, and you got these couple of good deer, and all of a sudden something walks out and you go, where did he come from? Well, those are the excursions. Every one of these deer were going, several miles during the rut. They would all of a sudden get off to chasing a girl one day and wind up miles away, stay 2 or 3 days, and come back. And every one of them basically were doing that. So that deer that you've been watching for years and years, that suddenly just disappears, he may have went off on an excursion and he may have got shot miles away. And then again, you may be the benefactor of that and see something show up that you had no idea was in the world. So
that just goes to show you never know what's going to show up.
You never know.
Yeah, my cameras were devoid of mature bucks last year, but based on that research, I knew to go sit and hope for the best.
So, William, before we move on to another topic, I want to ask this one question. As I travel around with Biologic selling seed, and I'll end up being someplace and not necessarily know anybody, but I'll just be listening to what the local deer hunters are saying. And many times I'll hear them say, boy, if I see a CWD deer on my place, I'm not going to say anything to anybody because I don't want the game wardens coming in there and shutting my place. There's a fear factor there is what I'm trying to say. What's a good way for me to help make sure that these guys do the right thing and they don't have this fear factor going on in their mind?
Well, there is a fear factor there, and we certainly do. We notice that. We see it, and we see a reluctance to sample. One of the things I will point out is finding CWD early. States like Illinois are able to go in, and they are trying to reduce the deer herd right around the positive, but they're showing some success in that. But if you wait till it's gotten overwhelming, I'll take Benton County, Mississippi. 1 in 6 bucks we sampled there last year were positive. 2-year-old and older hunter harvested bucks. So at what point do you want it? There's a time frame there where we really need people to be sampling. And, we're not coming in to try to remove deer from a property. After we found the first positive, we did do some removal on properties that allowed us to come in. We never force our way in. And we only did that one time after that first positive. And I'm not saying that, I don't know where the future holds for how we manage CWD. I know as we're watching through, let's think about this for a minute. We see how other states, it goes back to that communication with other states and what's working and what's not. So we understand that hunters don't want that change. In many cases, one of the biggest fights we have is to try to stop feeding. That is a big one because it can bring deer into close concentration. And as we battle COVID, we know what bringing humans into close concentration will do. It will help spread an infectious disease. The same thing happens with CWD. The best scenario is to limit that feeding, I would think, statewide. Food plots spread deer out over a much larger area versus feeders confine everybody to one small area that they're putting their head in. So, but we do understand that there is a reluctance, and we really need people to work with us on this sampling. We really do. This coming year, we're going to be implementing some other techniques that will allow hunters to try to reduce the deer herd further. We want to use the hunters. I'll say that point blank. Hunters have shown, we started this conversation all talking about how good a job hunters have done in managing across this state, whether it be with a flood, whether it be with managing. By the way, Mississippi hunters harvest more 3-year-old plus and 4-year-old plus bucks than just about any state out there. We're top when you look at the numbers from QDMA. So we know hunters have the desire to manage the deer herd properly. We want them to do it. And I will stress again that we have never gone in anywhere and removed deer that we didn't have permission. We only did that targeted removal one time. That would have been back in the spring of 18 after our first discovery. So beyond that, we're sitting at a 22 county CWD zone now, 19 counties in one zone and 3 in the other. So, but we can't beat this, and we can't manage it and hold it where it is if we don't have the hunters' help.
That makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I would say we don't want to look up and be dealing with high prevalence rates when we first find something, because your options at that point are much more limited than they are if you find it in a very low prevalence in an area. Then you have choices. And the goal of most states is to try to keep prevalence low, as opposed to, many states are battling in whole counties where the prevalence is 20% or higher. We don't want to get there. The research shows that when this prevalence gets to the numbers out of Wyoming and other states are showing about 25 or so %, it starts reducing the deer herd. We don't want this disease to manage our deer for us. We need the hunters' help to manage this disease and manage the deer. We don't want to let it manage the deer.
Mm. Well said.
When I first bought this farm a short time ago, every single field was grown up with brush 8 and 10 feet high. But it went from that to this. And even though I planted biologic with very little moisture in the ground, I was really amazed at the results. I just sat in this field with my wife as she shot her very first deer. We could not be happier. We made a memory that will last a lifetime, all because of the effectiveness of the best food plot seed on the market. Biologic is better seed, pure and simple. Log on to plantbiologic.com to learn more.
Well, you are pretty excited that they gave that buck a choice. I could see your eyes light
lit up.
That buck a choice made.
I'm really proud of MDWFP. Honestly, I've always bragged on our game laws, and I think we keep the wildlife at the highest priority. So I'm proud of what we do in the state, not only as hunters but as our agencies too.
And the officers, you run into an officer.
Yeah,
they are always nice and
right.
They're
you made
guys.
me forget my question.
All right, I'm sorry.
But I'll go back to it. There it is. It jumped right back in my head. No problem. Just what you're hearing from the other states as far from a CWD perspective. We obviously here in Clay County, most of us here have a Alabama license, and we spent some time in Alabama too. So, and I think to Bobby's point earlier, maybe just in the Southeast as a general, of your general knowledge of what's going on out there.
Sure. Deer coordinator in Alabama is Chris Cook. He and our friends, we speak often. I know they're sampling quite a high number of deer. Not as many as we are, but we found it. So we're going to increase sampling around those areas to look for prevalence. But in Alabama, they're doing a pretty good job of sampling around the state, and have increased sampling quite a bit over the past couple of years. Tennessee, of course, they found it right after we found it in North Mississippi, and they found it in those counties there along the border, and that's where it seems to be centered, is there. Now, they have already found it as far out as Jackson, Tennessee, and as far west as right off the Mississippi River, all the way above and northwest of Memphis. So they have quite a large spread. It seems that outbreak there is our North Mississippi outbreak as well. It seems to be centered a few miles above the state line in Tennessee. This disease kind of expands, so you can kind of look back at where it'll tend to have kind of a nucleus where the highest density is, highest prevalence rather. Arkansas, several thousand samples. They found CWD back in 2016 in February, I believe it was, and since then have found several positives. Have a pretty large CWD zone up in northwestern Arkansas, but disturbingly found one positive about 70 miles east this past year from any other positive they had found over around Independence County. And that one is not very far west of the Tennessee. It's kind of one of these deals where, okay, where did that positive come from? If you go north about 70 miles, you hit Missouri where there are positives. You go west, there's positives in Arkansas. You go east, there's positives there in Mississippi, Tennessee. So really don't know how he got there. But anyway, that one's cause for concern as we watch that gap between the positive outbreaks is narrowing drastically once they found that deer. Louisiana really picked up sampling. All the southeastern states are looking. Louisiana hadn't found it yet. Alabama hadn't found it yet. Georgia hasn't found it yet. And we hope they don't. But we're all talking, and we talk. In fact, I've got a meeting later this week with Missouri, Arkansas, and Tennessee, as we'll be talking about the outbreaks that we're dealing with. We talk quite frequently about it.
Good.
So,
I know that's important.
Is there any new research on CWD that most listeners probably haven't heard about? We've all, it's been on the map for a couple of years. It's been kind of a popular thing to talk about. Is there any new data?
Oh, there's a lot of studies ongoing. It was a recent study came out where they did detect prions in semen. That was of very much note.
Okay.
Texas recently found it in a red deer. There's only been a couple other red deer detected with it, but I don't know how many have been tested either. So that was kind of newsworthy. There's still work and still hope on some vaccines, and there's a lot of work being done, but CWD has hit a national level of awareness now, and there are national level meetings ongoing and national level research. Here in Mississippi, we're participating in a strain typing study. We're going to be participating in another study of techniques and management tactics that's being undertook by University of Cornell and Michigan State. We're working together with states all across, and even Canada. The strain typing study we're working with out of University of Alberta. So we're working on a continent-wide basis to try to battle this disease. Whitetail deer, guys, I didn't get into this earlier, but they mean so much. Well, to me, to y'all, but to our entire state.
Our economy.
Yes,
it's a huge deal.
Go to 2011 numbers, $1.1 billion with a B dollars is hunting in Mississippi. And that's from 2011, with deer representing 80% of that total. So deer they're the workhorse here. They're driving so much jobs, small communities, even from hunters, the influx of hunters. People kind of ignore that. And you take some of the smaller communities and hunters leasing land in that area, coming in, buying food plot seed, buying the diesel fuel, renting the tractor, buying a UTV. I could go on and on, right down to the supper they have at the little store that's down the road that night that keeps a mom and pop restaurant open. So they mean so much. And then take into account I've processed my own deer for many, many years. And so I know that when I process an adult doe from central Mississippi, I'm going to get about 28 pounds of lean trim meat. That's me doing it for years and years. You hunt somewhere different, that'll be a different weight. But where I hunt, that's what the does are producing, and that's what I tend to put mostly in the freezer. Buck's kind of a rare thing around me, so I shoot does. But
I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
I don't know if I remember. I don't think I've ever killed a limit of bucks ever.
Oh no, I know I hadn't.
Ever.
I've killed quite a few limits of does though.
Take a guess at how many pounds of venison that is on Mississippi tables. It's over 6 million pounds if you just look at how many deer were killed last season. So when you start breaking that down into quarter-pound meals, you're talking about 24 million meals. How important is that to the people of our state? I stress deer mean a lot to us. They mean a lot to us. Just, I devoted my whole life to the study of this creature and the management of it, and I'm very passionate about it. So, but they're very important to Mississippi.
Yeah, the general public does not know how important it is overall.
Definitely hugely important to us here. We've all kind of staked our careers on it.
As have I.
Yeah.
So.
Well, cool. I did have one more question. As gamekeepers, obviously we want to be very good, in our reporting. We want to have our harvest analyzed for the disease and reported accordingly. From a land management perspective, if there's one thing we should or shouldn't do, and if it's one's not enough, you can throw two out there. But what would those be? And if you got three, that's fine too.
Collect data on your deer herd. That's the biggest thing. And I talk to a lot of people, and if you're not collecting data, do you know that what you're doing is working?
Right.
Or if you're not collecting data, I oftentimes tell people, all you're doing is shooting deer. So if you're not taking body weights, looking at the ages of those deer, and you can learn to do that yourself, or you can work with a biologist in doing it, but monitor what you're harvesting, what's on your property, record observations, write down what you're seeing, and get a few deer tested. We've got drop-off locations. We're going to be running well in excess of 40 deer head drop-off locations across the state this year. That we're going to be, we typically empty those freezers. They're just little chest freezers sitting out. You fill out a little card, about the size of an index card, and tear off the receipt. But drop it in there, and we try to get your results back in as timely a fashion as possible. We empty those freezers once a week. But collecting data, that disease data, looking at another thing. I mentioned hemorrhagic disease. I mentioned that we want to have a little of it every year. That sounds crazy to some people. But if we don't, our deer herd gets naive. It's kind of that herd immunity. You kind of hear talk of that with this COVID-19 outbreak. We're headed toward herd immunity. When will it reach, and will we reach it? Well, deer in the southeast tend to have immunity, but you're able to follow hemorrhagic disease, blue tongue outbreaks, by looking at the amount of hoof sloughing. Where, I'm looking at my left thumb right now. I hit it with a hammer about a month ago. I'm still wondering if it's going to fall off. It's starting to flake. Well, that's what their hooves do whenever they get that high fever from blue tongue. And you can harvest the deer, which has already gotten perfectly healthy, because it had blue tongue in July or August, and now it's recovered from it. But you can monitor that over the years of, okay, well, we have half our deer this year that we're harvesting had sloughing hooves. We're probably going to have slightly fewer deer in the deer herd because we lost some. And as that's the type data I'm talking about. And once again, whether you work with a biologist, we work with folks for free out there. All they got to do is call us and get up with our private lands folks and get on DMAP if their property meets qualifications. And we have other options within DMAP within that. But anyway, that's the biggest thing I would tell people. because otherwise everything else you're doing, you can't measure it. You got to have a guide to measure if what you're doing is working. Let the deer herd tell you if what you're doing is working.
Can't argue that.
No.
And Lanny, you love data.
Oh, yeah. It's a data-driven world right now.
You ought not have a food plot out there without a cage sitting out in it somewhere to monitor deer use on your food plot.
You know, you're so right. And oftentimes that's such a simple thing to do, and folks just don't think about it.
It's always an afterthought, yeah. I should have put a utilization cage out there, and then I'd have known.
That's right. And I always put it as a designated marker. So when you take a kid hunting or somebody who hadn't been hunting a lot, you always know that thing is exactly 100 or exactly 75. You always got that marker in the field. You don't have a rangefinder, you don't need one. You don't need it that day for that par. So anyway, just a secondary use for that cage. Don't put it right by the stand.
Yeah, that's
that close.
That's a really good suggestion.
So, but that's just one more way of collecting data. You're monitoring. Now, sometimes it may tell you you're not that good of a farmer, and you may not like to see that result, but it'll still tell you that.
Well, there's so many factors, but the whole idea, going back to your point about gathering data, it's well taken. And if we're going to be able to understand and manage our properties, we got to have that information.
Yeah,
we do.
Small price to pay for the resource, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. And plus, it'll make you a better gamekeeper. Knowledge is power.
Well, William, we've been here almost an hour, and I think there's
I could keep talking deer for the rest of the afternoon. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, we could listen. There's a lot of things that we probably want to get you back and discuss. And what I'd also like is to leave with you is if there's anything you need us to help get the word out, that if you would call and let us, help you guys. We are, Toxic, just everybody here is just super supportive of, and I'm going to butcher it, but the Mississippi
Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks.
Yeah, it's got a lot.
We know you were born in Alabama, but you could at least learn how to say MDWFE.
Well, our agency has always had a good relationship with Mossy Oak, and that has shown through the years. And we thank you for that, and we will take you up on that, because there are messages that we do need to get out, and we'll be making some I&E pushes as it gets closer to season, and pick up on those and spread the word on them, and whether it be for CWD or new management techniques or whatnot. So, and I encourage hunters, I'll say, I guess I'll end on this. We don't really know what this season's going to bring. We know that, I know what I think is one of the direct competitions to hunting, I think, is college football. And I like college football too, so I'm not, but those two, people will not go hunting to watch a ball game one afternoon, and that's fine. We got a long deer season, but I don't know the status of that. It's kind of still a little uncertain. So we're actually looking at, are we going to have more hunters in the woods? Are we going to see an increase deer harvest?
Get ready.
We've been talking about this too. It's
so
we're practically sold out of food plot seed in July, so we're having to get more.
It has been crazy around here.
And a lot of people saw the price of meat this year.
Mm-hmm.
It skyrocketed there for a time frame, and I felt like I was sitting on a gold mine with my freezer full of venison. And so we think there'll be a lot more people hitting the woods this year, and so making sure they're educated, making sure they're safe. They need a hunter safety course, and they need a license. But beyond that, getting them out there and getting them to harvest some deer, and that's going to be good for the herd and good for hunting in Mississippi in general. A resurgence.
Yeah, that really is, and hopefully these people that participate in it will enjoy it, and it'll become a part of their lifestyle again.
That's correct.
Yes, right.
Yep. Whether they are coming back into it or whether they're just starting. We've seen a trend in hunters declining in Mississippi and over most of the country. And maybe this will be that resurgence that brings people back into it. So,
and not just deer, small
that's right,
game,
not just
everything.
deer,
Yeah.
small game, everything, including fishing. So,
Yeah, William, I've noticed that a few months back that Mississippi is the first state to do an all-internet hunter safety course. So now with this COVID situation, and the officers don't want to have people gathered up in rooms and teaching them that a guy who wants a hunting license that hasn't gone through that course can go online and take it.
And if anybody wants more information on that, they can call our office and talk to our hunter ed department. But yes, we
That's
are
great
offering
news.
I saw
all
that. Yeah.
internet.
I did.
So hunter safety course now, and we encourage people to get certified and get out in the woods.
There you go.
Opens October 1. We can start throwing arrows at them then, and Saturday before Thanksgiving, which even earlier than that with youth season, 3 Saturdays before Thanksgiving, the youth can get out with rifles. So that's not far off, guys. We're already getting that little false fall this week, and this cool front pushing in. It did not feel like August this morning when I walked out at daylight.
It felt
It'll
good.
be better later in the
Felt
week.
great.
And I'm looking across the table, and I know with Lanny and with his son Hayden, there are some does that are in trouble this fall.
You better believe it. You better believe it.
Well, William, we appreciate you being here. Well, you took well more than an hour out of your day to be here, and we sure appreciate it.
Well, you're quite welcome, and I'll be happy to come back sometime. And we talked around the world on topics today. If we want to call back and try to focus in on some, be happy to do that in the future.
Well, sure. Now, is there any phone numbers or websites or email addresses you want to give out before you get off?
Absolutely. Going to give our website out, MDWFP, and that is the first letter of Mississippi Department Wildlife Fisheries Parks.com. Folks can go there, and there's a wealth of information there. Our draw hunts are for deer and some small game draw hunts on some of our wildlife management areas just opened up for applications. We got some really premier areas out there that are managed for older age class bucks. It's kind of hard to get drawn, but you can't get drawn if you don't put in. And so encourage people to look toward those. And if they want to learn more about CWD, that's there. All the public land. Mississippi has an abundance of public land. And all the license information. Anything they want to know about our agency should be on that website, MDWFP.com.
Well, that's awesome. I think Lanny's freaking out over here when you're talking about
You ain't got to tell them everything.
Oh, man. Well, look, y'all are doing a great job. There's Mississippi's lucky to have you guys, and the people of Mississippi are very fortunate to have such a great wildlife department because you guys really take it seriously.
Well, I will say I work with some of the best enforcement officers and wildlife biologists in the world. So they're dedicated toward preserving and conserving this resource we have. So
it's an important heritage, and it really is. We need it to be around. Okay, William, well, we appreciate you, and we'll have you back on in the future for sure.
Sounds great. Take care.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, William.
Thanks,
Appreciate
William.
you, buddy.
Boy, that guy knows deer, doesn't he?
He does.
Absolutely.
Hey, I'm Toxie Hayes.
And I'm Cuz Strickland.
You know, here at the Mossy Oak brand, a primary thing that we all believe in is the good that we do will last long after we're all gone, which is why we challenge everyone who loves the outdoors and the critters who call it home to participate in the second annual Mossy Oak Properties National Day of Conservation.
That's right, Toxie. Saturday, September the 26th, we challenge you to do something for conservation. Plant a tree, clean a stream, hey, introduce somebody to the outdoors. We want everybody to know that if you love the outdoors, you're the tip of the spear and you're a part of this conservation effort.
Absolutely. So the most important thing is, are you in? Do you accept the challenge?
I accept it. Do you accept it?
he hit on it there at the end, but the tradition of going hunting in Mississippi is just, it goes back a long way.
It's huge. And they're, I'll say it, I've been to a CWD meeting, and they're so good at, managing the, deer hunters are probably the most opinionated people out there.
No question about it.
And they have to handle all the politics of it and everything, and they're just so professional.
Mm-hmm.
Glad to have them.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is, the more you learn about them, the more you can appreciate them. Because, again, I knew that we were a leader in the nation in deer research, but, the connection that our Parks and Fisheries Division has with the actual hunter is quite impressive, too.
Well, guys, we've what's the next one going to be?
I don't know. Maybe we can do another one.
Why don't we do this? So if somebody listens to this podcast,
just give them your email address.
We'll give them Dudley's email address.
And your phone number.
It's dphelps@mossyoak.com. They can email with here's what I want to know
Bobby's cell
about.
phone number is.
Oh, me.
All right. Well, I appreciate all the hard work. Jason Cleveland manning the board over there, and he's
on the mix table.
Did a great job. We've got the intern Sam over here keeping us company.
Fact checking over there.
Yep. And if Dennis can get Sugar Red as a sponsor, we're
100% open for it.
Yep.
Maybe they could do a line of permethrin infused boxers.
Honestly, the guys at Game Hide, they have that
tick stuff. That's right.
Tick stuff. So I assume it would work for red bugs.
Why not?
They don't even know what a red bug is up there. All right. Well, look, y'all check out Furminator. I think it's Furminator.com, and they have a great product. They are a big sponsor of the Gamekeepers, so we wanted to give them a shout out. But other than that, we'll have another podcast coming up just as soon as we can, which will probably, I'm guessing, based on the pace we're at right now, we might get one out in about 2 weeks.
By turkey season. It's thefurminator.com.
Okay.
And Perfect. It was Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks.
I'll never remember that. All right. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Gamekeeper Podcast. And be sure to tune in again. Subscribe to Gamekeeper Farming for Wildlife magazine, and don't miss the Mossy Oak Properties Fistful of Dirt podcast with my good buddy, Ronnie Cuz Strickland.